T of IOCO, British Columbia, and he's going to tell us about the oil workers local number 4 in Vancouver. And you just go ahead, Mr. Turbitt.
What's this?
How did you?
Local.
This is local number 4.
This was the original
local
refinery union, or the.
That's what was the first union?
Well, we're the only ones in Canada.
Mm-hmm. That's right, but there were 3 in California, I think.
Oh, well, we weren't affiliated with them.
You were not affiliated?
We were affiliated with the Trade and Labour Council in Vancouver, and we had sent delegates there.
Mm-hmm.
But I just said so long ago, 40 years or more years ago, and I forgotten a lot of the details,
Yeah.
But I know it was March 1918 that we started talking about organizing, and we were out for 2 weeks.
Well, how did you come about doing this? I mean,
well, you see, we had the superintendent here. He couldn't say yes or no. He couldn't give us a raise without getting.
Go ahead
and draw on us, But we had no way. We had no way of getting in touch with them. Only through him. We didn't know what he was really negotiating, But from the refinery, when the refinery shut down, then he had to do something. So then they started to deck it with the union through him. And in fact, we got better terms from them than what we asked for. They just more than we really asked.
What, your union?
The Imperial Oil.
Did they recognize your union?
Yeah.
They recognized
yes.
Yeah. Well, how did you get? You were dissatisfied, I guess.
We were dissatisfied then because we hadn't had a raise and all during the war.
Yeah.
And the shipyard workers and all these other fellows were getting more money, and we figured that we were entitled to, because cost of living was way out of pounds then.
Oh
yeah. So Mr. Surdiman, he was a dedicated Imperial Oil man, and
what was his name?
Surdiman.
I see.
And he figured that we shouldn't really ask the Imperial Oil. He figured that they were good enough to give it to us when we were entitled to it.
Now, who was Surdiman? Was he a foreman or superintendent?
Yeah.
But how did you? What did you do? How did you go about forming a union?
Well, the Trade and Labour Council sent up 2 men from Vancouver.
Yeah.
Victor Medley was one of them.
Yeah. But you'd already gone on strike then, hadn't you?
Well, it wasn't really. We'd quit.
Yeah, but I mean, did this happen, or did you meet before?
No. There was no talk about the union or anything else until after we'd left the job.
After you just got up and left.
Yeah. And he came out and he organized them, and was president and vice president and secretary and all that stuff.
Where did you organize?
We didn't have no town site here then.
Oh yeah.
We had an old scow house down on the waterfront. Used to hold the dances and the parties in. Well, that's how we used for meeting and all.
And you, somebody phoned them up. Do you remember who was? Took the initiative?
Billy Baird.
How do you spell that?
B-A-I-R-D.
Yeah.
Billy Baird and Ernie Singleton and Pat Denny. They were the ones that had, that was appointed themselves.
Yeah.
As organizers. But we went along fine. We never had any trouble in back to work, and we got about 100%.
Now, well, before you went back to work, you went to the place, and Minchley was there, I guess, was he?
Yeah.
And what, was this all out in the open and everything? The company know about it?
Oh, yes, the superintendent, he came down there.
He came down?
Yeah. Talked to us, and...
what did he say?
Well, he said he didn't think it was fair, that we should have should have given them notice
Oh, yeah.
before we closed the plant down. And
But you went ahead anyway.
we went ahead. We couldn't help it then.
And do you remember who the officers were?
Well, that's those three men that I mentioned.
Who's the president? Do you know?
Singleton, I think.
Singleton.
Singleton.
And the secretary?
The secretary was a fellow named Cunahan.
Cunahan.
Yeah, he's dead now.
I see. And you formed a union, and did you negotiate then with the company?
Yeah,
And what? Singleton and the officers?
yeah.
Negotiated with.
Negotiated with
Were you still out then on strike?
Yeah.
Now, what about the other trades? You said a while ago that all the other trades came out with you. Is that
Yeah.
right? And
There was nobody left on the plant, only the shift men, process men. They stayed on for a week after we went out, you know, and then they decided they better get in on it too.
so everybody left.
So everybody,
And how long did this last? How long were you off
2
work?
weeks. 2 weeks. Yeah.
And during those 2 weeks, you from the union and you negotiated,
Yeah.
and then what?
Then went back to work.
Because did you get what you wanted?
We got more than we asked for.
What you asked for, and what did you
Well,
get?
I just forget the figures now, but we raised, the raise was, for one instance, the shift men work 7 days a week. 2 shifts a day. The day shift worked 10 hours, and the night shift worked 14.
Mm-hmm.
When they changed shifts, they had to work 22 hours to get a day off and change the shift. Well, they came back with a 48-hour week and about 100% boost in wages.
100% boost in wages. Now, was this after the war? Or
No,
before the end of the war?
this was in 18.
In 18.
Yeah, March of 18.
March,
the war
yeah, the war
ended.
was
The war
still-
ended
So that's probably why, don't you think? Or what do you think? That's the reason why you got it?
No, I don't think so. I think what they had in mind, the way I thought about it since, that they were waiting for the Standard Oil
Oh, yeah.
to put their plan into effect. And then they pretty well would take it from there, you see. But we jumped the gun on them, I guess. And they were ready. But when they got ready in 1919,
Mm-hmm.
then they put this up to boys.
Yeah.
They put this proposition in there, this
Mhm.
employees benefit plan.
Is that what they called it?
Yeah. And there was nobody in their right senses would have turned it down.
Mm.
See, one stipulation was they had to go with the company's union. See, the company elected or selected 10 foremen, and the employees elected 10 representatives
Yeah.
from each department.
Yeah.
And the superintendent was the chairman.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, it was kind of superintendent had the deciding vote. But we got along good. And you see what they did? They put in this pension plan, the first of its kind in Canada. Non-contributory.
Non-contributory pension.
Yeah. They had a health and accident insurance.
Workman's compensation.
No, there was no compensation in them
No.
days, but they paid after 3 days, I guess it was, paid you full wages
Mm-hmm.
until you, of course, they revised that all again in 1932.
Well, let's just stay here for a moment. Did you, for instance, did you have seniority rights under this plan?
More or less. It wasn't nailed down to strict seniority.
Did
It was more, the company could pick their own man but they didn't do that though. They stayed with a majority, ruling pretty strict.
and
One of the biggest
what happened then? Now, did your union disband?
the union just fell apart
Fell apart. Why?
because of this offer that the company gave them. It was so enticing. You couldn't blame them.
Did you get any wage increase in that too? Or no wage increase?
Yes,
Wage increase?
we got another increase without asking for it.
I see. And,
In the 1920,
What?
1919,
what was the reaction of the union officers?
well, they didn't fight very hard against it. No. You see, you could, on this plan, the company matched you dollar for dollar,
Mm-hmm.
up to 25% of your wages, to buy stock in the company. And you had your life insurance and accident insurance. That was contributory, you know. But they went 50-50 with it, and it went along then from that to when did the other workers in 46?
Yeah, I think it was
46.
And so that the union collapsed. And,
Yeah.
And what about the international? Before it collapsed, now you reduced paying members, didn't you? I guess.
Yeah. Well, of course, we know what they did do down there, which I don't know. They joined the OBU.
They did.
Yeah.
I see. Yeah.
We were hooked up
What's
to
that
the
about?
OBU for a while.
From when was that?
Well, that was during the time we were in
1919.
19. Well, the time, and that was when they had the big trouble in Winnipeg, you know.
During that time, you were in the OBU.
Yeah.
Well, how can you tell me anything about that?
Well,
Like, I mean, you're a member. You're on the executive?
no, I never held any office because I was more or less. I wasn't a foreman, but I was a sub-foreman.
Sub-foreman, yeah.
On an hourly pay base.
Yeah. Well,
But that OBU now, you can look
What
that up
happened there?
in your records because that was bad. You know, they got criticized for that by the company. You know, that was the
company didn't like that.
no, they didn't mind. They didn't mind being affiliated with the
Oil workers.
Trades and Labour Council in Vancouver. But when they were doing this big stuff, you know, that was a big strike. You know, in 1919 in Winnipeg when they put them in jail, Wordsworth and Irvin. McQueen, all, you know.
Yeah. They thought, what, did they think you were Bolsheviks?
Well, they thought they were too. They were a little bit out of our line, I guess, too.
Well, you know, what, do you remember meeting any of the OBU organizers or
No,
anything?
no.
Or did you have a vote, a meeting, or any kind of thing?
I can't remember now.
You can't. I mean,
I can't remember just what the procedure was there. But I know that we were affiliated with them, the OBU.
did you get a card?
Beg your pardon?
Did you get a card?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Well, but they, how long did this last?
Well, that we were hooked up with the OBU when we disbanded.
When you disbanded. And was there much of an effort made to keep Jim safe from the international, or for the Vancouver Labour
No,
Council?
Vancouver Trades and Labour Council was kind of falling apart then too. You know, I mean, they wasn't very active.
They could do anything about it.
They never bothered.
And what about? Do you remember having any contact with the international?
We never belonged to international.
You never did?
No.
I see. So they get you down in their books, you know.
As well, maybe we might have been hooked up with them, you know, but never knew anything about it. But through the Trades and Labour Council.
Yeah. Now, how about going ahead and telling us about what happened in your? Were you on the board at all? The joint board of the company union?
Yeah. I was on that for years.
From which side were you on?
The company. I was first.
You were the foreman.
I was the delegate from the filling house workers. at first.
Yeah.
But there came a vacancy in there in the foreman job. So I got the foreman job, and from then on I represented the company.
Okay. Now, what about how does the thing work out?
Well, it worked out all right. I don't know why I didn't. There never very much trouble, but of course, when the boys got the idea that they were going to form another union, well, it just naturally collapsed.
When was this?
That's about 1945 or 46 when they first started this oil workers.
They organized another union.
Yeah.
And the company union collapsed then, eh?
Yeah.
Why do you figure this? How did this happen?
Well, there was a lot of the boys dissatisfied. There was a new generation coming up, and they figured they could do better, I suppose, with their own union. Maybe they did. I don't know why. 10 years and been up there.
Do you remember how it got organized at all? Were you in on it?
No.
You were still a foreman.
Yeah.
So
No, I never. In fact, I wasn't very much interested because I didn't figure it'd ever go through.
I see. You did.
It did. No, I bet money with some fellas that
You did.
wouldn't make it. It did.
Well, tell me, in this book I read on the oil workers, they say that the company hired a lot of, they weeded out, they discriminated against some union guys. This is in 1920 or so.
Well,
So that they hired veterans and replaced them with the veterans. Is that so?
there was one or two cases, but the union couldn't learn about it because these men were to blame.
How is this?
One stipulation in the contract was there was no union business transacted on plant.
No union business on
Transacted on the job. Well, these fellas broke the rule and they got fired, and there was nothing. It was the union, the company had it.
Who's got fired?
Well, I wouldn't. They wasn't really fired. They were eased out.
Laid off.
Yeah.
And were they the leading members of the union, or were they just...
Well, yes, there was one of them. Two of them were pretty well up in the union.
Well, I mean, what about the president and secretary and so on? Did they stay in, or...
The president, yes. He wasn't, there was never anything done to him, but these other fellows, I don't think they would have been either if they had have lived up to their contract.
I see.
It was the fact they were like old, or they were carrying on union business and the company's time.
How was the union security like? Did they have a checkup, for instance?
In the old
union?
No,
They didn't.
no.
In the closed shop or open shop?
It was a closed shop.
It was a closed shop, so everybody had to join. And they didn't have much trouble organizing it, eh?
No, because it was done very quietly. There was no disturbance of any kind.
And they organized openly?
Yeah.
Company knew all about it?
Oh, yeah.
So,
In fact, there was company's representatives there at all the meetings. There was no hard feelings, There was no hard feeling. There was no. I think even the superintendent realized that we were entitled to more money with his hands were more or less tied, and he was an Easterner. And he didn't, he was acquainted with the ways of British Columbia. He hadn't been out here long enough to.
At least he was pretty radical.
Yeah.
Well, still is, I suppose. What about, the OBU, did they organize?
Well, of course, they collapsed too, the OBU.
Yeah, but I mean, how did they go about organizing? Were they more secret?
Well, I don't know just how that come about now. Whether the boys applied for membership in there, I think that's how it was. I think they applied to
at a union meeting.
Yeah. I suppose they'd been asked to join up.
But you don't really remember.
I don't know, it's so damn long ago. I've forgotten all that stuff years ago.
Yeah. Now, well, is there anything else you want to mention about this?
Well, that's not, that was about all the to it. It was a very simple affair. The union was organised and the company recognised it and gave us all we asked for. We had never had any trouble. In fact, I was promoted to foreman a couple of years afterward. I had never any kick coming.
And were you known as a pro-union guy, or?
No, well, I wasn't a pro-union. I was just one of the boys. That was all. You know, there was 300 of us working here then, and it was just a few of the ones that had more or less some experience in union business that run the thing.
Was the plant right here at IOCO?
Yeah.
At the time?
Yeah.
That's right. Another thing, you mentioned on the phone, you were in the Western Mine Workers?
Oh, well, that was when I first came from the oil country.
I see. When did you come over?
1909.
1909, and what, did you work in the interior?
I worked in the, down Washington State for a while.
Okay.
Then I got a job in the sawmill for Phoenix.
Yeah.
But before you could wrestle for a job in the mine, you had to belong to the union. The bartenders, the waitresses, and the cooks, and everybody belonged to the union up there then.
And which one was this? Western Mine Workers?
The Western Federation of Miners.
Western Federation of Miners.
Pretty sure that was it.
Yeah.
I had the card for years, and
You haven't got it?
I couldn't find it now.
Serious.
But there was nothing. I was sitting there one morning when they hauled in a couple of guys that got blowed up in the mine, so I decided, of course my old man told me, he was a miner out of Africa. He
Yeah.
told me, he said, stay away from the mine.
So then you went up to BC?
This was in BC, yeah.
This was in BC?
Yeah, down in the States I was just...
Whereabouts in BC is this?
It's in Phoenix. Grandly consolidated at a big mine at Phoenix.
Do you remember anything about that?
Well, I remember they...
What years were this, for instance?
Well, they were running strong in 1909.
Yeah.
And they had the big smelter at Grand Forks.
Yeah.
That went on. I went down to Grand Forks from working the sawmill for a while. Down to Grand Forks, and they were in the same union, you see, the smelter workers.
The sawmill was also in the...
No, the sawmill belonged to an independent fella. He was cutting fire timbers for bridges that were building up on the railroad. But the Grand Forks smelter, they belonged to the miners' union too. And you had to have a card before you could go. You see, when out in the morning at o'clock, rush the job. You didn't get on then, you went out at 4. And if you didn't get on then, you went out at midnight. It's at 9, you know, see, they wanted a man, well, so.
And this is the union hiring?
No, they had the timekeeper did the hiring.
But you had to have a union
Had to be a union man, yeah.
And how did you go about applying?
Well,
No trouble joining?
Oh no, I went down into Phoenix with a member, you know.
Yeah.
And joined up, got my car, paid my dues.
Do you remember what they were, the dues?
I think it was $5 to join. $1 a month, something.
$1 a month. And
but I never, after I came up to Vancouver in 1910, I never.
So you were only there for a year?
No, less than a year.
Less than a year.
6 months.
Do you remember any of the officers or any, did you have any strikes then?
No, not in my time. And of course, shortly after the mine, the oil kind of played out. They shut her down, shut the smelter down, and then built this plant up at Antioch, up north of Turbitt, which is dismantled now, and they moved that plant to Princeton. Just across the river from Princeton there.
Yeah.
And that's played out now. That's 3 times with another war. No, and then those in that up in the mining towns, you bartenders and waitresses and all that don't be couldn't hold the job.
Even when they were they employed by the company?
No, it was right in the restaurants and the saloons around town.
Everybody had a union card.
Yeah.
Well, what if they didn't? Nobody would call.
Well, they wouldn't hire them if they didn't belong to the
hire
union.
them. But nothing really occurred while you were there.
No, I wasn't interested. Cold winter too. It was the winter time. Thinking about getting out to the coast while the weather was warm.
How old were you then? When you came over? 20. Well, I guess that's.
Oh yes, there was nothing really happened around here that was noteworthy. We just went along. There was, as far as I was concerned, there was no intimidation or nothing against anybody outside of those fellows that you mentioned. There was talking in the shop on the, trying to organize, trying to talk. And I said, that's another thing. I don't think that there was. Don't think it was a closed shop.
Well, the oil works.
Yeah. But I don't think it's compulsory, but everybody recognized that they had to. See, they brought in when they changed over from 2 shifts to 3. That took in all the process men, the pump men. And they had to bring a lot of outside men. And of course, they promoted a lot of the fellas from the labouring gang, promoted them up into the gift jobs.
Do you remember what the Jews were in the oil workers? What is that? What you called them? By the way, what did you call them?
The refinery workers union.
The refinery workers union.
It was $1 a month, I guess. $1 a month, I think. Or $1.50. I wouldn't swear to it.
Well, you got anything else?
No, I don't think of anything else. No, I could go on talking and telling you about things, but not stuff that you're interested in. Nothing to do with this, but
nothing in the union.
No, not connected to you, because we went along, as I tell you, from 1920 to 1945 with the company union, and it was pretty peaceful meeting. So no. Of course, one thing Imperial Oil did do, they always paid more wages and was paid to in the same category around the district, around Vancouver. Like tradesmen and labourers.
And there was no attempt to organize a union?
Not in the meantime.
Until 46?
Not in the meantime, no.
I see. Well, that's the end. I